Alright. After 2 weeks of swanning off, I must admit it, we need to go back to work. I've recently spent 12 days in Brazil, and even if I enjoyed hanging out with my friends and touristing around Sao Paulo, the main reason for my trip was to attend Brasil FurFest. So, hi everyone, this is Zyly the Fox, and welcome to my yearly convention review kind of video. At this point, Brasil FurFest is an institution on its own. This year, the convention celebrated its 10th iteration, and together with it, the consolidation of Brazil as a community that is finally on the global map in the furry community. And that's the core point in order to understand what this convention represents for the Latin American furry fandom. Brazil has that essence. No matter where you come from, you will feel naturally at home. But 10 times better because they have caipirinha, but yeah, okay, that's a different story. Now, on a serious note, Brazil has a way to go about life that reflects both responsibility, but at the same time the ability to understand when it's time to have fun. Yet the most important lesson is that you have even more fun when everyone is part of the whole thing. Let me explain. I believe the nature of this relies in what makes everyone want to come back to BFF. Personally, I come back not because it's my top favorite con so far, but because I feel welcomed. A good host will make you feel part of the event without falling in what I call the main character syndrome. What I mean is that despite being one of the largest furry events in Latin America as of the time this video is posted, this convention never feels like it's trying to position itself as the center of everything. Instead, it feels like a convention that understands its role within a much larger community. BFF has been around for a decade now, and during that time it has helped put the Brazilian furry fandom on the map. What stands out to me is that this wasn't achieved through a mentality of, hey, look at us, but rather through a mentality of, look at what we can build together. That is what Brasil FurFest as a convention is. It's a solid institution that, throughout the years, has consistently showcased artists and creators, furries from all walks of the country, and even other events within their local fandom. It understands that recognition is not something to be hoarded or to boast about, but something to be shared and a tool to construct a better space for all. One of the biggest lessons BFF taught me is that being a good host is not about being the star of the show. You can throw the biggest party imaginable, but if your guests don't feel welcome, appreciated, and seen, then something core is missing. The convention succeeds because it makes people feel like they belong there, whether they are first-time attendees or long-time veterans. There is a very human aspect behind that philosophy. BFF seems to understand everything that many communities struggle with. Other conventions are not competitors. When one event succeeds, the fandom benefits. That mentality has become one of the defining traits of Brasil FurFest over the years. Rather than treating recognition as something to be guarded, the convention has consistently used its space to help the Brazilian furry fandom grow as a whole. And that is probably the most valuable lesson BFF taught me. Responsibility is first, of course, but never forget that communities are built by people and not by numbers, and that everyone shines when they shine together. That is the institution that this convention has become. Now, with all that said, institutions are not perfect. Brasil FurFest 2026 was acceptable. It wasn't bad by any means, but it was far from what I would consider this convention's peak. I think it's time we talk about both the things BFF absolutely nailed this year and the areas where it still has room to improve. When I first attended this convention, there were 3 aspects I pointed out as the reasons why BFF stood out as such a solid event: its timing, its professionalism, and its organization. During Thursday, or Day 0, pre-registration was supposed to take place, like every other edition they had. And I say supposed to because it never happened. Now, it would be irresponsible from my side as a communicator to place all the blame on the convention staff because external circumstances played a major role in what happened. However, I do think there is a difference between controlling a problem and being responsible for decisions that increase the risk of that problem happening. Last year, the convention took place in downtown Sao Paulo, which made access significantly easier for both attendees and the logistics team. This year, the convention moved to a city called Campinas. Yes, that's the actual name of a city. And while the venue itself was gorgeous, reaching it was considerably more complicated. During peak hours, most attendees relied on heavily congested highways to get there. It took me almost 2 hours to arrive from Sao Paulo, and I can only imagine the logistics team faced similar difficulties. What I'm trying to say is that the staff could not control the traffic situation, but the choice of venue inevitably exposed the convention to those risks. I understand finding venues for events of this size organize can be difficult, but logistics need to be taken into account. Alternatively, and visually speaking, the hotel was fantastic though. The pool area was an amazing addition. It gave me that Megaplex pool experience. And on top of that, the Brazilian summer holiday atmosphere I had been craving for so long. But eventually, aesthetics and logistics have to coexist. The venue looked outstanding, but accessibility is equally important when you're hosting one of the largest furry conventions in Latin America. The venue for next year has not been announced yet, but I hope this particular aspect receives some consideration moving forward. I'm not trying to say that the venue should change, but maybe logistics should be planned at least a day before day 0. Unfortunately, the consequences of day 0 carried out into day 1. Since Friday hosts some of the most important events of any convention, including the opening ceremony, timing becomes the backbone of the entire schedule. Because pre-registration never happens on Thursday, both pre-registration and regular registration ended up merging into a single process on Friday morning, which extended into the afternoon. The result was a reg line that stretched from reg desk to almost all the way to the entrance gates. I can understand registration taking several hours at Anthrocon with more than 20,000 attendees, but for an event with roughly 1,500 attendees, the situation became difficult to justify. The delays consume a significant portion of the day for many attendees, myself included. And I've got to admit I didn't go through the ordeal of regline thanks to my ticket tier, which contemplated personalized registration at my hotel room. I honestly give props for that, like thanks for the indulgency. But for the regular attendees, this was unfortunately not the case. So, given the absence of activities on Thursday evening, I carefully planned out my schedule because there were several panels that I wanted to attend. However, the registration delays forced the opening ceremony to be pushed back by roughly 2 hours, and that created a chain reaction throughout the rest of the day's programming. To give you an example, after the opening ceremony, I had access to an exclusive meet and greet that was included with my membership tier. At the same time, another activity that was originally scheduled for later in the day was moved into that exempt time slot. I understand why the staff made that decision. They were trying to prevent events from running excessively late into the evening. But compressing the schedule inevitably created conflicts and reduced attendance for several activities. Oh, and this one gets personal. I really wanted to play that football match the convention organized, and instead I was sitting in a room panel. Grrr. Now, on a more serious note, I understand the position BFF currently occupies within the fandom. As of the moment this video is being posted, Brasil FurFest is the second largest furry convention in Latin America and the largest in the Southern Hemisphere. At this scale, problems become more complex and consequently pressure increases, leaving the margin for error much smaller. Was compressing the Friday schedule ideal? No. Did I like it? Also no. But given the circumstances, I honestly struggle to think of a better solution. Last-minute problems require immediate decisions, and convention staff rarely have the luxury of sitting down and carefully evaluate every possible alternative. While overlapping activities was unfortunate, I still believe it was preferable to cancelling them altogether. Despite the setbacks, the convention managed to keep its programming running and all major activities ultimately took place. Now, there's one issue I would really like the staff to address next year, and that is room allocation. Because this year's venue was smaller than the previous one, room availability became extremely limited. Some attendees criticized the existence of an overflow hotel, but honestly, overflow hotels are completely common for conventions of this size. The real issue was how rooms were distributed. For the international convention BFF is aiming to become, I strongly believe a room lottery system is necessary. Under the current first-come, first-served model, most rooms were sold out on the very first night reservations opened, almost a year in advance. Unless you purchase one of the highest tier memberships, many attendees never had a realistic opportunity to secure accommodation at main. And to be clear, I think the room at main pack included perk attached to high tier memberships is perfectly fine. It adds value to those memberships and rewards people willing to support the event even more, like my case. My criticism is directed at the remaining room inventory. Once priority reservations have been handled, everyone else should have a fair chance to obtain a room. If BFF wants to be the welcoming and democratic convention it presents itself as, that philosophy should begin with accessibility. Losing a room through a lottery is disappointing. Yeah, of course, but at least everyone had an opportunity. Never having a chance in the first place feels far worse. Now, it sounds as if I did not like the convention after this initial tough feedback, but I am far from not having enjoyed this edition of BFF. There are many aspects of Brasil FurFest that I genuinely enjoyed, and many things the staff should be proud of. The first one is how well they managed to bring the convention experience beyond the physical venue itself. If you happen to miss this year's edition, there was an entire production crew dedicated to broadcasting activities live through Brasil FurFest TV, complete with professional-grade equipment and production quality. Honestly, BFF TV surprised me for the better. Not only did it make the convention accessible to anyone with an internet connection, but it also created a record of the event that attendees can revisit long after the closing ceremony. Activities throughout the weekend were consistently entertaining, and many of them helped showcase the passion Brazilians have not only for their culture, but also for their fandom. And speaking of the convention experience itself, let's talk about the venue. While I still have reservations regarding the location and some of the logistical challenges it created, the venue itself was fantastic. The hotel was divided into 3 major spaces: the lobby, the pool and outdoor areas, and the convention exclusive spaces. Together, these created an environment that constantly felt alive. Whether you wanted to relax and socialize, attend panels, or simply enjoy the atmosphere, there was always something happening within short walking distances. In many ways, this edition of Brasil FurFest reminded me of what I like most about Megaplex. Now, don't get me wrong, Megaplex is its own event and Brasil FurFest is a completely different one. What I'm referring to is the atmosphere. One of the things that always stands out to me about conventions held in Florida is the combination of good weather, outdoor spaces, and that unmistakable summer energy. This year's Brasil FurFest managed to capture a very similar feeling. More importantly, it reminded me that conventions in Latin America can offer an experience that stands proudly on its own. You don't necessarily need to travel thousands of kilometers to the United States to enjoy that combination of summer, full fursuiting fun, and a furry convention. That atmosphere was further supported by several practical decisions made by the staff. Because room availability was limited, many attendees ended up staying in an overflow hotel. To address that, the convention provided a free shuttle service connecting both locations throughout the day. Was an overflow hotel an option people liked in general? No. But was this solution effective? Absolutely. Every 20 minutes, the shuttle bus service would transport attendees from one hotel to the other. And let's be fair, 20 minutes is not that bad. Some cities' bus services are far worse. Believe me, I like public transport. Considering the circumstances, it was a practical solution that made navigating between both locations considerably easier. Likewise, the fursuit launch was one of those small details that demonstrated genuine consideration for attendees. Since many people commuting from the overflow hotel were carrying fursuit bags and gear back and forth, the convention offers storage spaces where fursuiters could safely leave their equipment during the night. I'm not sure how many people ultimately used the service, but having the option available undoubtedly made the convention experience more comfortable for those who needed it. More broadly, the venue felt remarkably safe. The hotel complex was gated, spacious and large enough to accommodate outdoor activities without forcing attendees into crowded areas. Considering that many people enjoy socializing and fursuiting well into the evening, having that sense of security contributed enormously to the overall atmosphere of the event. And nowhere was that more noticeable than during the fursuit parade. Last year's parade was held indoors. While it was enjoyable, the environment naturally limited some of its visual appeal. This year, however, the parade took place outdoors, allowing participants to move through open spaces surrounded by greenery, the pool area, and the rest of the hotel complex. There was something undeniably appealing about it. The venue's flat terrain, well-maintained outdoor areas, and spacious layout made fursuiting both comfortable and accessible. More importantly, the outdoor setting gave the parade a sense of scale and personality that simply wasn't possible indoors. That's something I really liked. Now, if we're talking about accessibility though, there is another aspect of Brasil FurFest that deserves a lot of recognition. This convention has become a truly international event. At this point, attendees travel from all over the world to visit BFF, and the convention staff clearly understands that reality. Signature schedules, announcements, and activities were consistently available in both Portuguese and English. This is something I praised in my review last year, and it is something I will happily praise again. Providing bilingual information may seem like a small detail, but it sends a very important message. Everyone is welcome here. That level of hospitality reflects positively not only on the convention itself, but also on the Brazilian furry fandom that it represents. Yeah, Portuguese can seem easy to follow, but I am not going to deny that this particular detail makes the convention stand out internationally. Oh, and for those who remember from last year's video, coxinha.
I learned how to say it.
Now, earlier in this review, I spent quite a bit time discussing Friday's scheduling problems. The question is, did those issues continue throughout the rest of the weekend? Well, fortunately, the answer is no. One thing I have always appreciated about Brasil FurFest is how seriously it treats attendees' timing. People build schedules around convention activities and plan their entire days accordingly. When an event starts on time, it demonstrates respect for the people who chose to attend it. Saturday was a perfect example of that professionalism. The dealer's den was scheduled to open at 10 AM for priority attendees, and at 10 AM, it opened. And from that point onward, the convention largely returned to the level of punctuality I had come to expect from previous editions. Seeing the staff recover so quickly after Friday's difficulties was generally reassuring, and it demonstrates the level of organization operating behind the scenes. Speaking of the dealer's den, I think this year's version was the best one I have experienced at Brasil FurFest so far. Last year, one of my criticisms was how crowded the space felt. Last year, working through some areas was difficult, but this year, both the artist alley and the dealer's den benefited from significantly more spacious rooms. Attendees had room to comfortably browse, sellers had more space to display their products, and the entire experience felt considerably less congested. Navigation was also much easier. Large digital displays throughout the area showed vendors' locations and booth information, making it simple to find artists and vendors without constantly consulting a map. It was a relatively small addition, but one that significantly improved the overall experience. And finally, there was the variety. The products being displayed ranged from fursuits and fursuit props to fursuit accessories and clothes. I was also able to purchase art, pins and posters, and even music CDs from both local and international vendors. What makes the dealer's den at Brasil FurFest special is not simply its size, but the diversity of talents it showcases. Local creators share space with international artists, creating an environment that feels like a celebration of the creativity that exists throughout the fandom. For a few hours, it genuinely felt like a small piece of the furry world had gathered under one roof. And after all these points, that is the best way to summarize Brasil FurFest as a whole. After the difficulties of Friday, the convention found its footing and delivered the experience that many people had traveled there for. More importantly, it demonstrated something I have said many times throughout this review. When people organize an event with passion, care, and genuine love for their community, it shows. And throughout most of this weekend, it definitely showed. In conclusion, what makes me happy about Brasil FurFest 2026 is that, despite the rough beginning, the convention never allowed those initial setbacks to define the rest of the weekend. Friday was undoubtedly a difficult day, and I think it's important to acknowledge that. But what I find far more important is the convention's ability to recover from those problems. By the time Saturday arrived, the event had found its rhythm once again, and what could have easily become the point of no return slowly became just a little bump in the road of a quite successful edition in my opinion. Likewise, although I spent some time discussing the logistical drawbacks of this year's location, I would be lying if I said I did not enjoy what this venue brought to the convention experience. If Brasil FurFest decides to remain here, I would be more than happy to return, and if the convention eventually moves somewhere else, I sincerely hope it does so without abandoning the qualities that made this venue special. But for the love of God, don't move to Rio. However, if there is one thing that should never change regardless of where the convention takes place, that is the way Brasil FurFest represents the Brazilian furry fandom. Throughout this review, I have spoken about what made this event logistically and organizationally worth it, but the reason I keep coming back to this event is much simpler than any of those things. It is the warmth of the people, their hospitality, and the way they make you feel at home in a foreign country. That spirit is something I have consistently found in Brazil, and BFF remains, in my eyes, one of its best ambassadors. So, will we see each other again for Brasil FurFest 2027? Honestly, I don't know. Parts of me really wants to come back. Another part of me knows that life has a funny way of changing plans when you least expect it. And there are still many things I need to figure out before making that decision. I've got my personal plans for next year, and they will make it hard for me to return if I don't follow a strict schedule. What I do know is that I sincerely hope our paths cross again, whether it's at BFF, somewhere else in Brazil, or at another furry convention somewhere in the world. But until then, thank you so much for watching this review, thank you for spending a little bit of your time with me again, and most importantly, thank you for being part of one of the best memories of this year. If you like this review, like the video and share it with a friend. Maybe they would like to try this convention and all they need is just a little push. If you've been to this edition of BFF, what did you like about it? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to read what you have to say. But until then, I hope you enjoyed this video and I hope to see you all in the next one. Take good care of yourselves, everyone. Meow!
Are you rooting for Argentina tomorrow?